Hi, I'm Angie with AngieEKnows.com and SurfaceDesignAcademy.com, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how I screen print using a Thermofax silkscreen. Now, Thermofax silkscreen is not your traditional type of silkscreen. It's a special type of silkscreen used by textile artists. It's also used by tattoo artists to get the image onto the skin before they do the tattoo. In this video, I'm going to show you the machine that's used to make a Thermofax silkscreen. I will show you the process of making the screen, and then I will show you how I print with it, and I will be using my print board that we made in the previous video. So if you haven't watched that video, go ahead and check it out now.
So let's start off with what a Thermofax machine is. It's technology from the 1950s, and it was a photocopying technology before the copy machine as we know it. To make the copy, a thin sheet of heat-sensitive paper was placed against the original document and ran through the machine and exposed to infrared energy. The infrared energy caused the carbon in the original document to be transferred to the heat-sensitive paper. So now let's take a look at the Thermofax machine itself. This is my machine. It's old, it's heavy, it's bulky, it's a little beat up around the edges, but it works. These are very simple machines. Underneath that gray cover, there's a belt on two rollers and also a light that burns very hot and bright, which produces the infrared energy. The light is located under this cover that the arrow is pointing to. Now, I won't be showing you that because I don't want to open that cover. These machines are very sensitive and very expensive to repair. It also consists of a belt on two rollers, and that's what feeds the documents through the machine. There is also a knob that will allow you to control how fast or how slow the document feeds through the machine. And this will be a factor in how well your silkscreen burns. If you have your original document that's very dark and has a lot of ink, then you can run it through the machine a little faster. Where if you have a document that's very light and doesn't have much ink, you will want to run it through a little slower. On the knob, I've placed several markings, and these markings represent how light or how dark my original image is. So if I'm using an image that's very dark, I can set it for the dark marking and know that it will feed through the machine at a proper speed for that amount of ink on the image. And the same thing for a lighter image. Now let's take a look at what I'll be printing and the colors I'll be using. This first image is going to be a background texture in a very pale green. This pale green will be very similar to the piece of fabric that I'll be using, so it will become a background element and it will be hardly noticeable unless you're up very close to the piece. The next element I'll be printing is a small feather. This feather is very light. It doesn't have a lot of heavy color, a lot of light lines, and I'll be using a very light tan color. Now, when I mixed this color, I added a touch of the green so there would be some continuity between the colors. The next element is the same feather, only this time I did a mirror image of it so it would look just a little different. And I will be printing this in a darker version of that tan so that this is going to be like a mid-tone or a light to medium tone value for me. The fourth element is another feather, but this time instead of a line drawing image, this is a much heavier image, so this is going to have a stronger presence once it's printed, and it will be printed in a medium to medium dark value of the brown. The final element I will be printing is the same feather that I just showed you, only it's slightly larger, and I will be printing this in the darkest value, so it will be the most prominent element on the fabric. Okay, so far you've seen the machine itself and you've seen the images that I'll be making my silk screens from. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more about the machines. These machines fell out of favor when the Xerox copy machine came on the scene, but now they're used by textile artists to make these silk screens for printing on fabric or paper. The material used to make the silkscreen consists of a film that has a plastic saran wrap type material on one side and a screen mesh on the other side. When the film and the image that contains carbon is passed through the machine, the infrared energy melts away the plastic coating on the back of the film. So wherever there is carbon in your image, the infrared energy will melt away the plastic backing on the film. And this creates an opening in the film that allows your paint or other medium to go through when you're screen printing. Now let's go ahead and make a screen. I'm using one of my feather images. I think this is the largest one. And I have the plastic side of the film up against my image. And I'm going to run it through the machine. Here I've just started feeding it, and you can see the light has just come on. I like to leave it there just for a few seconds to allow the light to heat up a bit before I release it and let it run through the machine. It will run through and come out the bottom, and then I can check it and see if it's burned enough or if I needed to run it through again. I decided to run this through a second time because I thought it could be burned just a little better. But you have to be careful, because if you run it through too many times, you can actually burn a hole through the entire mesh, and that would make your screen unusable. Once I'm satisfied that I've got a good burn on the mesh, then I can separate the mesh from the original image. And now the silk screen is ready to use after I apply some Gorilla Tape around all four edges to provide a sort of a frame. Okay, now it's time for the fun part. Let's get to printing. When printing on fabric like I'll be doing here, you need some type of padded surface. So what I use is Homosote, which is a soundproofing material used in the building industry, and this is what it looks like. It's this gray, beigey type compressed paper material. For printing on paper, you don't need a padded surface, so this board gives me two uses. I can print on the unpadded side for paper and use the padded side for fabric. For padding, I just used a layer of felt covered with another material. And as you can see, this board has been used many times. Just a piece of fabric that I'll be printing on, and as you can see, I've already printed several layers. I printed the background texture and that green color that we saw earlier. I also printed the first small feather in a very pale tan. It's very subtle. And I printed the third feather in that medium or light to medium color. And then I printed the first solid feather. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do and show you the process, is I'm going to print the final feather, and it's larger than the darkest one that's already there, and you'll see it as we print. I won't be printing as many elements because this is the largest element and it should be the focal point, so there won't be as many this time around. So here's the silk screen, and you can see where I've added tape around the edges. And what I'm showing you here is the difference between the sides, between the plastic side and the mesh side. The plastic side has a smooth feel to it, and the mesh side has a textured feel. And you always want to print with the textured side up. You can very easily damage the plastic side if you print from that side. So to start with, you're going to just put a bead of paint across one edge, whichever edge you want to start printing from, and you want to put a little more than you think you want or think you need, especially for that first print. It takes a lot more ink the first time around. Once you have your bead of ink, you want to take your squeegee, and your squeegee can be anything. I have a little small squeegee here that's made for screen printing, but you can use a credit card or an old hotel key. The main thing about screen printing is how you hold your squeegee. You want to hold it more in an upright position at about 70 degrees. You don't want to lay it flat. You're not frosting a cake or anything. You're trying to push your paint or your ink through the opening of the silk screen. So hold it at an upright position, near about 70 degrees or even straighter, and that will give you the best print. If you hold it too low, like I see a lot of people do, you're not pushing the ink through the screen, you're basically just pushing the ink up higher on your squeegee. You will want to pull about 3 to 4 times depending on your image. A very delicate image like the line drawn feathers won't need as many pulls as a heavier image like this. And over time, as you start to print and get used to printing, you will develop a feel for how many times you need to pull. Now, once you've pulled, I like to hold down one edge of the screen and lift up the other side to make sure that I have a good print before I totally lift it up and move it to another position. And lift up the other side to make sure that I have a good print before I totally lift it up and move it to another position. It's also a good idea to have some paper or a tray. It's also a good idea. You will want to pull about 3 to 4 times depending on your image. A very delicate image like the line drawn feathers won't need as many pulls as a heavier image like this. And over time, as you start to print and get used to printing, you will develop a feel for how many times you need to pull. Now, once you've pulled, I like to hold down one edge of the screen and lift up the other side to make sure that I have a good print before I totally lift it up and move it to another position. It's also a good idea to have a piece of paper or a tray nearby so that you can lay your screen and your squeegee on in between prints. Also, while you're printing, you want to print or pull your squeegee in the same direction. You don't want to go back and forth. That will cause your screen to shift and give you a blurry print. Eventually, you will need to add a little bit more ink or paint to your screen. I'm working on a smaller piece of fabric here, and it's actually larger than my print surface, so I don't have it pinned down. But normally when I print, I'm working on a printing surface that's slightly larger than my fabric, and I could pin it or even staple it into place. But here I need to be able to move it around. As I'm printing, I'm trying to take into account composition. I don't want everything piled up on top of each other, and I am taking and overlapping this print on top of some of the previous prints that I've made. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm flipping and rotating the image so that all the feathers aren't going in the same direction. If I thought about it, I would have created one of these solid feathers and made a mirror image of it so they didn't look the same. Well, that's it for the printing. I do have a few more things I want to talk about before I show you the finished print. Okay, now that we've finished printing, let's talk about a few other things. The first thing is caring for your Thermofax silk screen. These things are very delicate. They're strong but delicate, if that makes sense. When you clean it, and you want to clean it as soon as you're done printing, do not, under any circumstances, allow the paint to dry in the screen. It will ruin your screen. And when you clean it, you don't want to scrub it. What I basically do is put it in a sink, and I turn the sprayer on gently, and I spray away all of the paint. And if I do that, as soon as I'm done printing, I don't ever have to scrub it in any type of way. If I do have to scrub it, all I use is my hands or a very, very soft sponge. But do not use any type of heavy-duty scrubber to clean your screen. Now, one thing you can do to help with cleaning your screen is to remove the excess paint or ink before you start to clean. I like to do that by printing off an extra piece of paper or some excess fabric, removing as much of that paint as I can, and then take it to the sink to clean. And by doing this, you won't be washing a lot of paint down the drain, which is a good thing. Okay, now let's talk about how to properly finish off your fabric. You want to allow it to dry several days. I'm using acrylic ink, and that's what I recommend you use, acrylic inks or paints. Allow it to dry for several days and then come back and heat set it with a hot iron. So from the back side, press it with a hot iron and then turn it over from the front side. Doing this, your piece will be washable and will last you a very long time. And now here's a look at the finished piece of fabric that we screen printed using a Thermofax silk screen.
Well guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this little demonstration on how I do screen printing using a Thermofax silk screen. Now you may be wondering, hey, I don't have one of those machines. How can I get one of these screens? Well, there are a number of people who will make screens from your images, and I will put their information down in the description below. I will also have a link to my Amazon account for a Homosote board that you can purchase to make a print board if you don't have access to Homosote in your local area. Now that is an affiliate link, and if you purchase using that link, I do get a small commission. Now, if you haven't already, go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you will be notified of any new videos that I upload. I hope to see you back here again sometime soon, but until then, have a beautiful day. Bye-bye now.